Good morning, this is Ben, and the video I want to respond to is called The Story of Creation by the Thinking Atheist. It's intended to be humorous. Now this video basically, I would see it as a response to what a lot of Christians think that the biblical account of creation is, but it's not really a response to the actual biblical account and what the Bible actually says. And the reason for this is that, to put it honestly, atheists always criticize Christians for being unscientific and misunderstanding and misinterpreting science and then criticizing science. Well, this is exactly what's happening here. This video does not take into account the basic rules of interpreting ancient texts, and so therefore winds up misinterpreting the text and then criticizing a misinterpretation. So let's just jump into the points. Well, let's just, before we do that, let's just look at, we'll look at the first point because it's kind of separate from the other ones. The 6,000-year-old Earth, it says, the Genesis story believes 6,000-year-old Earth. That's stupid. Well, again, this would all be decided. Actually, there's quite a lot happens before the first day, which is an issue that needs to be addressed anyway. Then if you fast forward, you've got you've got the days listed there, but if you look in Genesis 2:4, it says, "These are the generations of the heavens and the earth when they were created in the day that the Lord God made the earth and the heavens." So it would appear that whoever wrote this book didn't intend for the day. He just spoke of all the happened in the first chapter as one day, where it was 6 days before. And in fact, even in English today, we'll say, it was back in the day of the horse and buggy, before cars or something like that. It doesn't necessarily mean, it was 24 hours. It's most of human history, actually. Anyway, we'll get to the other points. And it may raise an issue about light already was made on its way to Earth. Again, that's not really a criticism against what the actual biblical account goes into. And you say, well, I think, yeah, he says, just a lot of things are made strange, and he's just saying things that seem out of order, and God hid some dinosaur bones to confuse archaeologists, and then God made light, then the sun, and what we have to understand here is that whoever made this video is approaching the Genesis text wanting Genesis to answer questions and assuming Genesis is written for the purpose of answering questions that it is not actually written for the purpose of answering. In other words, if you come at this story and say, I want to know the natural history of the earth, how old it is, what it was like when it was first made and what changes in weather and geology went through. I want to know when the first life formed. I want to know where it formed. I want to know what it was like. I want to know how it formed and what exactly, I want to know how we went from no life to life, and I want to know how the water cycle got started. I want to know how plants came onto land and all these different things. This text was not written to explain like a history, like a natural history. This happened and this happened and this happened and this happened. It's not written to explain these major events in the natural evolution of the earth. It's not written to explain those. It's not written to answer those questions. And if you think it is, I can see why you would think that, because that's what we think today. That's what we're wondering about today. That's what the question is today. But when this story was written, that was not the question. The question was, should we worship the gods of other nations? And what this story does is it goes down the list, the pantheon of gods, from Babylonian mythology, and it lists some other gods, some other things that people worship back then, and it says this one God made that, and this one God made that, and this one God made that, and this one God made that. We miss this because we're not concerned about worshiping those gods. Those, that's not an issue for us today at all. Mostly because this text and and Christianity and the spread of Christianity has done its work so well that it stamped out the worship of all those gods. And so this text has kind of become a victim of its own success, because people don't understand what it's attacking anymore because it attacked it so well. Now, one of the other reasons we miss this is because we're not Jewish and we don't even know the names of those other gods, and this story was written in Hebrew using odd, strange words for the things that the one God created. And but the words that are odd and strange to use, like in other words, the word for sun and moon, and sometimes they get translated like the lesser light and the greater light. But the thing is that those words did not line up with the normal Hebrew expression, but they lined up perfectly with sounding like the God of the other nations. So in other words, there's puns in here. Now, so in other words, the order of events in creation don't. What's happening in this text is massive amounts have been skipped. Like it says, in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. The earth, okay, so verse 1 just talks about it in general, and then verse 2, you jump to a reference point of the earth itself. Everything's done from the reference of the earth, which was what those ancient people would have wanted to know. And the ancient people believed that there was a chaos god, in the Babylonian mythology, Marduk, and even in Greek mythology, they believed it started more chaotic. There was like a chaos god, but this one says, God created that early primal chaos, and the earth was in primal chaos. And even scientifically, we know the earth was in primal chaos. And yes, it was dark. There were clouds everywhere. God said, "Let there be light." Probably what that's meaning is light came down to the earth for the first time, and there would have already been stars. And even in this phase, there would have been the formation of the first primordial life. But this text isn't going to mention that because it's not trying to address that issue. It's not trying to tell you when life first originated, because those ancient people would not have been worshiping the early formation of primordial life in a microscopic way in some ancient sea or puddle or something. That would not have been something to be worshipped by them, and so there would not have been an issue to address there. That he's addressing the primordial chaos god, the light god, sky gods, rain gods, and saying, this is when that was made by God. And next, God made that other thing you think's a god. Next, God made that. And then, the sun and moon, again, it's not the creation of the sun and moon, but from the reference point of earth, this is when they would have become visible. And what those ancient people saw as, looking up at the sun. Because they didn't have a concept of the sun for what it really is, but they did have a concept of their viewpoint of the sun and the moon and so forth. And this, it would have been later when that was created. Plants, they certainly worship plants. And then we could get into some of the animals, but because there's stuff that just doesn't come through, it's lost in translation. But we'll look at, he doesn't really go, he said, he talked about man was made naked, and it was very mean of God to make man naked. There's an assumption built in here that God intended for man to stay in the garden. That is not necessarily a justified assumption. He may not have intended to have man leave the garden in the way that he did. But it is important to note that when man did wind up leaving the garden, God did give them clothes. So there probably was something special about this garden and probably was something special about humans, in the way God originally made them. God used a rib to make a naked woman. Again, this, I guess the creation of humans is something we'll have to talk about. This is the point of real divergence between science and the Bible. If you go back to Genesis 1, there's not really a problem. And most of the problems people raise are not really a problem. But one issue of divergence is, how did humans really originate? And it's important to note that Genesis is silent about whether or not there could have been, hominids or partial, half man, half whatevers, or even anatomically correct humans, could have existed. But what would have had to happen is God would have to have entered actual modern human with different traits into the mix, and that would have been the change in how humans came to be. And he would have had to have made, specially made just these two, and they would have been different from any of the other creatures on the earth. Does that line up with science? Well, we don't have enough evidence to say yay or nay. The emergence of modern humans in Africa appears to be very dramatic, but again, there's still much debate. And really, science is silent about this, as silent. In other words, the Bible's silent about what the science has shown us, and science is silent about what the Bible has shown us. So maybe one day we'll know some more. But if we go, and let's see, what is it? God placed the forbidden object in the garden as a taunt on the naive and innocent humans. Well, I don't see, they weren't naive and innocent in the sense that he did explain to them very clearly not to eat that. And, it is an assumption, a smuggled in purpose, that God's purpose was to taunt them and to mess with them. He could have had other purposes, like giving them freedom to guide their own moral lives. This was, in the Genesis account, this was the only moral, virtue they could have, or vice. He made it very simple for them, actually, and it very much not a taunt on naive and innocent humans, because he kept them blind to so much that we understand today about good and evil. He just kept them blind to it. He said they were naked and they didn't know any shame. So he's very much not taunting them. He's maintaining that there is, a choice, a morality in their life, but he kept it very simple. He greatly simplified it. So it's the exact opposite, really, if you look at for what the Bible actually says. And then he talks about Satan was created perfect by God, but somehow manifested evil. Well, again, would appear that Satan was free to, well, first of all, created perfect would not really be true, because perfection is, we talk about more bigger moral issues here, and we don't want to waste too much time talking about it. But ultimately, only God is perfect, and to be creation is to be separated from that perfection, at least in the concept that you can't fully comprehend it. But Satan, would have rebelled against even what he did understand. And because, as the Bible says in the later chapters, that he rebelled against God being better than him. And he had to have some understanding of that. But anyway, they eat fruit and sentence all of us to suffering and eventual hell. In a sense, yes, we inherited a problem from them, but it's not as simple as that, because when they ate the fruit, they gained a greater knowledge of good and evil, which imparted to us the knowledge that we need salvation, because we know how bad we are. We all have an instinctive knowledge now. We don't have to have some command from God. We instinctively know that you shouldn't do this and you should do that. And this is a biblical account of that, that they ate that fruit, and although it was the first sin and brought sin into the world, it brought them, it was the tree of knowledge of good and evil, and so that they were born with an understanding about, you know, good and bad, more so than, you know, we all inherited that too. And more importantly, we've all rejected that. We've all gone against that. We've all, you know, been bad willfully. It's not just a matter of being cut off from, in other words, they were created, Adam and Eve were created not perfect, but on the path to, you know, in right standing with God, as far as, you know, they were supposed to be, and able to grow closer and closer to God. But when they sinned willfully, they were cut off from that. And we are born inheriting the problems that, you know, our parents gave us in that sense. But we sin willfully too, and cut ourselves off even from what our parents might have been able to give to us. So there, responded. I would love to hear comments about this, because I feel that this is something that, you know, non-Christians and even Christians have so many more questions and issues to address about, and there could have been something I missed or something. I'd love to have that pointed out to me, or a mistake or something. But there it is. Thanks. Bye.